mong gi-post, sir, itong sa YouTube.
Aw. Okay na. Iko na. Wa pa malagi ka punaran ang slide. Kinsa ang wala sa inyo ha karon Shinab? Si Igagamaw. Na.
Na ako, sir.
Fernandez. Wala lagi to si Fernandez. Gaid Kent na. Gumaran Annalina. Okay. Nanas Judian.
Oh, na siya, sir.
Okay na?
Oh, i-start na an.
Start na ta. Di gid mo ga-on og ko ano, video. Ano man?
Wala ka mang PC, sir.
Ah. Kamo, Shinab.
Huawei, sir. Huawei.
Hindi ko Huawei.
Huawei, sir, ba? May problem pag may nakikonnect lang ko sa ano, sir, ay sa Google ba, tas hindi ko mag...
Di kakamang ko an. May pa
Yes,
si
sir.
RB Julio.
Always.
Nag-enjoy mo sa lecture gahapon, Shinab?
Yes, sir. Gitawag ganit ko, sir.
Gitawag ka?
Ikaw
wala
nagtawag
ka
sa akin,
nag-answer.
sir, eh.
Oh,
Gani.
gani. Anong wala ka answer?
Wala sila nalubag, sir.
Nasya ko pagtawag mo,
Gani.
sir.
Anong masyak kang Nga na, dako na kay ko? Anong masyak ka?
Nasya ko, sir, kay una-una, gid.
Una-una, gid. Sige na, shall we start? So for today, Group 4 will discuss about theories on international relations. No? So basically, there are various theories of internationalization, but international relation. But the two basic theories are the liberalism as well as the realism. Okay, these are the two traditional theories of international relations. It is very important for you to be able to differentiate the two because later on sa exam, you are going to identify what are the primary components of every theories. Okay, so basically the two theories, the liberalism and the realism, kung mo yung kag-liberalism, more on kuha na siya positive nga perspective, kumbaga positive, whereas kabaliktaran po dayon ang realism wherein it is more on the pessimistic view of international relation. Then other than that, we also have kay nag-evolve man nga mga IR theories. Ang liberalism nahimo in the modern time nahimo siya neo-liberalism. Neo means bag-o, di ba? And then ang realism na evolve into neo-realism, okay? And then later on, as states around the world and the view of international relations became more mature, na yung mga bag-o nga mga theories. This includes the English school of thought and then also the constructivism. And there are also theories nga gitawag ni sila nga mga critical theories of which the group will discuss later on, which includes the Marxism. Okay, you have a background on this. The post-colonialism, kung post-colonialism, you refer to that period where in many countries around the world attained their independence from their colonizers. So basically, that happened right after the Second World War. And then, of course, feminism. When we talk of feminism, the theory advances the rights of women, okay? Women empowerment. And then the post-structuralism also. Okay, so basically, these are the important concepts and theories in international relations that we need to understand. And I hope that Group 4 will be able to give justice to their topic, okay? Because this is the really, o kumbaga, the meat of international relations. Okay, shall we start? By the way, I encourage
So,
everyone, if you have questions later on, you can ask the group. Okay, I really encourage you to ask questions, clarification, so that we can have a fruitful discussion. Okay, shall we start, Sheena?
okay, sir. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, sir. So, we are the group 2 and we were going to report or discuss about the international relations theory. So, in this kanang chapter, theories of international relation will allow us to understand and try to make sense of the world through different lenses. Kagaya nagihatagan nito ni Sir of a little background about those different lenses daw, which is the liberalism and the realism. But in this chapter, in order to consider this field, this is was kanang mas give simplify lang siya diri nga libro no ay diri nga kuan para mas masabtan ninyo ang mga theories sa international relation. So this chapter is kanang divided into three spectrum, which is the traditional theory, middle ground theories, and critical theories. Ang mga example po nga gigamit diri is kanang kuan lang siya, nang dali lang siya ninyong masabtan para madali lang ninyong masabtan ang amon nga report. So first is the traditional theories. Theories are constantly emerging and competing with one another. Kuan gid siya sa una, di ba? Pag first gid is daghan-daghan gid na kuan no, kanang mag-emerge na mga theories sa una pag yun, like bisan kinsa lang ang di man siya bisan kinsa but kanang mga bitaw mga disciplines, mga theories about the world or kanang mga panghitabo sa palibot nato ang mag-emerge. So from this reason, it can be disorientating to learn about theoretical approach because dili ta kabalo kung asa ang tinuod dito or which one is kanang the states of fact or kanang dili. But kay the moment mag-ingon ka nga it's a true nga kanang fact kung gingan nila, there's another theory din nga mag-emerge. So one of this is we have Thomas Kuhn. Slide na mo, pakikuan lang. Lagi na next. So, Thomas Kuhn is, itong iyang libro nga, The Structure of Scientific Revolution, nag-set sa stage of understanding how and why certain theories are legitimized and widely accepted. Nasa libro nga kanang kuan niya, nasa gibuhat nga stage sa libro nga katong Structure of Scientific Revolution. Madungog ko ninyo, sir? Gaulan man ko diri?
Yes, madunggan. Klaro yung tingog, but dili garan yung slide, Shinab.
Gani, sir, once na kung dili siya garan. Pero okay na, sir?
Yeah, continue.
Okay, sir. So, he identified the process that take place when the theories are no longer relevant and new theories was emerged. Naghatag siya reason kung when ang isa ka theories is kanang widely accepted or kanang tinuod and when it is kanang relevant to the theories emerge. Pero sa una mang God, like for example, sa una, we believe that the earth was flat, di ba? Di ba gatuta sa una nga, ay sila ra di ay kay wala pa man tato. Gatuo sila sa una nga, flat daw ang kuan kay gusto mo sa magkuan nga dili siya flat, which is whenever you kuan magtan-aw is flat gid ang kalibutan para sa uban sa una. So we accepted this as a fact. Kay kanang of course it was said by kanang mga kilala ng mga tao or like wala man sad dili man sad ta maka-study if tinuod siya or dili. But with the advancement of science and technology, human discarded this and previously accepted belief. Tungod kay nag-emerge na sad ang mga kuan sa una, mga science, technologies, mao din to nga another naano po yung mga bagong nga theories nga nag-prove na ang world ay ang earth daw is not flat, it's round. So when such discovery takes place, a paradigm of shift result as the former way of thinking is replaced with the new one. So kay naman kay gi-prove Manila ang ang world daw is not flat at all, but it's a round. So another amount of na siya na day mahitabo na dayon ang paradigm shift, which is ang dating nga ginatuhan ninyo is mailisan na pud siya bagong nga theory na mas accepted siya o mas katuuhan kay because of the advancement of science and technology. It was kanang ano daw nga sa una si Galilei ang nag-ingon nga ang world daw is kanang round, and also it was proven daw by Magellan when he do the kanang katong paglalakbay niya nga round daw ang world kay wala man daw siya na natagak or na paglibot niya sa kalibutan. Sa dagat siya nag-agi, so mo to. So, this is, ang importante lang ninyo nga i-keep sa inyong mind is, ang international theories plays a role in explaining the world and how, based upon different time period and personal context, one approaches may speak to us more than another. So, kani magud siya ang amo manggod is ang pagkuan man gud sa international theories is started from before till now kay until now is ginakuan pa jud natin ang international theories ay international relation. So traditionally there have been two central theories of international relation, which is the liberalism and realism. No, para mas masabtan nato siya is amo siyang i-elaborate sa inyo ang liberalism na belief o perspective and lenses or kung how liberalists view the world and how realism view the world. So first, we have the liberalism. In international relation, it refers to an utopian theory, and it's still recognized as such to some degree today. When we say utopian theory, it is kanang ideal society. Like, the liberalist kanang people, sila nga, the human being are good and they believe peace, harmony between nations is not only achievable but desirable. Diba? So, kuan daw sila kanang ang peace daw achievable, kanang ang kakuan daw sa ang kanidong ang harmony is kuan if is desirable and achievable daw siya kay no one will wala man sa tanan man kita is ga kuan gid gato kita sa peace and harmony. We are all kanang ga hope or kanang ga wish nga peace magminabuhi og malinawon. So Immanuel Kant kanang kuan siya sang one of the contributor about kanang liberalism developed the idea that the state that shared liberal value should have no reason for going to war against one another. Kaya syempre, ang mga liberalists, gatulan sila, ideal sila like, kanang everything will, kanang tsada, kanang ngana. Tapos in Kant's eyes, the more liberal the state, their will in the world, kanang kung the more daw nga liberal ang isa ka bansa or ang isa ka lugar, society, the more peaceful it will become. Since liberal states are ruled by their citizens and citizens are rarely disposed to desire war. So of course, tanan kita is gusto og kanang kalinaw. So wala gid gusto nga magkwanta no magpaginobot or war kanang dili daw siya desirable pag sa liberalism nga view. So this contrasts to the rule of the king and other non-elected ruler who frequently have selfish desire out of state of citizen. Diba? It was previously discussed by the other kanang groups about the conflict between the church and the empires, the European, about mga mga kuan na dayon nga nag-aaway-away na dayon sila, that's because of the power or kanang kuan, because dili tanan manggod sad lagi nga gusto og kanang kalinawon, labi na ang mga katong kanang gusto mag-rule like kings, non-elected ruler ko, mga selfish nga gusto nila sila ang mas kuan, mas taas, mas dato inana. So his idea have resonate and continue to be developed by the modern liberals. Like what Sir kanang mention kaganina is kanang even until now there are some people pa din na gagatuo sa kanang mga sa liberalism, like mga ideal society, like war is ang peace and harmony is achievable and desirable. Ang liberal, they have faith that the idea that the permanent cessation of war is an attainable goal. Like kanang dili bitaw kanang sa liberal daw nga kanang ilahang pagtuo is dili gid kuan sa tawo nga magkagubot ta, kay goal gid nato always is being kanang kuan lang, kanang peace and harmony. Taking liberal ideas into practice, so we have here sa slide namo is the former US President Woodrow Wilson. Natakil na nato ni si President Woodrow Wilson last time, right, kay Sir Nico siya, Japon to siya. So, addressing his famous 14th point to the US Congress during the final year of the First World War, he is one of the US President who kanang fight against nag-stand siya or may contribution siya during the First World War so he presented his idea of rebuilding world beyond the war. The last of his point was to create Junior Association of Nations, which further become the League of Nations. I'm sure you're familiar with the League of Nations. So the League of Nations was created largely for the purpose nga to oversee affairs between states and implementing mga kanang about sa kanang war, sa kaayuhan inana, so as well as maintaining international peace. Since he is a believer of liberalism, he is a liberalist, he believed in peace. So amon to ang gibuhat niya ang League of Nations, or he's one of the founder of the League of Nations. So, however, when the Second World War kanang nag-start na pud ang Second World War, the League of Nations collapsed due to the outbreak of Second World War, and its failure became difficult for liberalists to comprehend. Right, guys, since nang permi na lang gikan sa First World War, gaaway lang Japon, kagubot, conflict and all, mga gira between the church and the government. So ang mga tao is this kanang lisod na siya i-comprehend, ibalik otro, and this even seems to contradict their theories. Therefore daw, despite the effort of prominent liberal scholars and politicians such as Kant and Wilson, liberalism failed to retain a stronghold and new theory emerged to explain continuing presence of war. So nalisudan na sila ibalik kay kanang medyo siguro unbelievable na kuan niya nga nung dili na magtuo ang mga kanya if the peace and harmony is desirable and achievable since gakaginubot na ang kalibutan, right? So because of that, another kanang theory emerged that become known as the realist. So during the Second World War, realism gained momentum. It appears to offer more convincing account, mas katuhan daw nga kuan nga faith or kanang belief nga or theory on how and why worst conflict kanang ang gakahitabo do sa ila, which is the World War I, mga kagubot is gakahitabo sa ila. So, as its name suggests, advocates of the realist purport it reflects the reality of the world and more effectively accounts of change in international relations. So, sa realist view, sa realist nga view, they believe that they believe it reflects to the reality. So kung unsa ilang gakakita, so kung unsa ang gakahitabo, unsa ang kanang gakahitabo karon sa palibot. So they believe sila. They are the opposite of the liberalism. One of the kanang scholar nga nag-approve is si Thomas Hobbes. Nana siya sa ang slide. Are Thomas Hobbes. So, is often mentioned, he is one of the kanang, gina-mention siya always when it comes to kanang discussions about realism due to his descriptions of brutality of life during English Civil War. So, Hobbes described human as a living in orderless state of nature that he perceived as a war for all against all. So, para do kay Hobbes, kanang kita daw, ang mga tao daw sa una is kanang gapanimuyo lang daw nga kanang without kanang orderless lang ta. Gasalig lang ta sa gakuan lang sila sa state of nature, like gakuan lang sila kay desirable lagi ang peace and harmony. That's why wala sila mga rules and all para ma-achieve nila ang peace and harmony. So to remedy this, para masolve daw to, si Hobbes proposed that a social contract was required between a ruler and the people of the state to maintain relative order. So he proposes the social contract that between the ruler, of course, since panang naman tayong mga king and queen, nanatay politics during so they propose it para to maintain relative order, para naay rules ang mahitabuan. We can gain kanang peace and harmony, or to lessen the war and achieve the kanang ato ang ginaingon sa liberalism na peace and harmony. So, one center area that's that really I joke. So today, we take such idea for granted as its usual player. So today lagi is nanatay mga rules. Nanatay mga every country kanang from the very start, like barangay, sa purok, sa inyong province, sa inyong sa city, or sa Mindanao, Luzon, or sa Tibok Philippines is nanatay rule, mga nakaset na batas para ma-order na or kanang makuha na ta kanang nanatay maset na order para walay ma-break, para dili ma-break para walay gubot nga mahitabo. And they set rules and establish a system of punishment for those who break them. Karon lang sir ha. Muna din nga natay mga rules karon nga gakahitabo. It's because of the kanang gi-propose ni Hobbes nga social contract, or kanang nag-propose siya mga kuan niya magbuhat daw og order ang citizen and the ruler para sa kuan, para matagaan nila og kanang limit lang ang kaya buhatan sa mga ruler and sa citizen. So we accepted this in our perspective state so that our lives can function with a sense of security and order. That is why war seems more common than peace to realists. Indeed, the war is inevitable. Like sa realist daw, kanang ang war daw sa ila is common na siya. Kanang mas kung ang conflict bitaw, like dili makuha ng isa ka society without conflict. That's why we have kanang order para makuha ng mga conflict, right? So, one central areas that set realism and liberalism apart is how they view human nature. Realists do not typically believe that human beings are inherently good. So, as I was saying kanina, is kanang opposite sila. Dili sila gatuo nga ang tao daw is muutan. Nagid na sila yung mga ginatago nga mga kuan kanang pagka-selfish nila, like to desire ng power, more power, magwatid sila o kanang mga dautan or kanang dili maayo maka-cause of conflict or war against another proponent nila. So instead daw, ang realist daw claims individual act in their own self-interest. Right? We all act ng tanan man siguro gyud ta mag-act ta para or kanang ato ring buhaton ng isang para sa tuwa is kanang makaayo sa tuwa. So for realists, people are selfish and behave according to their own needs without necessarily taking into account the needs of others. Like kanang mga like kanang mga realist daw is gatuo sila nga kanang ang mga tao is mga selfish, ang gusto lang is more power, and more money, ganun. It is realist believe that conflict is unavoidable, unperpetual, and so war is common and inherent to humankind. Normal lang daw na siya, normal lang daw ang para sa ila, it is common. Kanang whenever ka mag-adto or whenever ang may tabo, kung wala tay kanang order or kung wala pa tay mga kuan karon, mga rule or laws, is siguro Japan na tay World War III karon, right? So one of the people nga nag-contribute sa realism is Hans Morgan. Next slide. So si Hans Morgan is a prominent realist. He is known for his famous kanang statement that all politics is a struggle for a power, right? Bisan kinsa nga basta gid na itaw nga magsulod daw sa politics is they all want power. Either it is for good thing or bad thing. Basta ang ilang gusto na is they have the power to control or to kanang makahatag og kaayuhan sa uban nga tao. Gusto nila makadesire sila og power. Gusto nila nga na sila power para makatabang, power para makakontrol sa uban nga tao, mag-inana. He is known for his famous state about kanang politics is struggle for power. So this demonstrates typically realist view that politics is primarily about domination as opposed to the cooperation between states. Hence, kanang kon Japan, useful to be briefly recalled that idea of theories being lenses. So, sa realist and liberals look at a very same world. Gatanaw na sila sa ang realist and liberalism. Gatanaw na sila sa same world but with different lenses. Ang realist, gina-focus nila dito kung asa ang mga kanang gakahitabo nga mga domination, mga kagubot nga dili maayo sa atoa, while the liberalism daw is they look into the same world but with different lenses. Na naka-focus sila dito sa good thing lang, that the people that the peace and harmony is achievable lang. So it is more important to understand that there is no single liberal and realist theory. Scholars in these two groups rarely fully agree with each other. Dili na sila mag-agree sa isa't isa, even though who shared the same approach. Same approach lang ilang ginagamit, no? Each scholar has a particular interpretation of world, which includes ideas of peace, war, and the rule of the state in the relation. Both realism and liberalism have been updated to more modern version. Like what Sir Nicosha being mentioned earlier nga, karon as of today, nanay mga neoliberalism, neorealism, mga mas nag-evolve na sila. So that represents a shift of emphasis that their traditions rule. Nevertheless, this perspective can still be grounded into theory of families or tradition. In your, for example, if we think of contrast of optimist and pessimist, we can see that when we say optimist, it is kanang kanang kuan daw kanang hope nga na sila yung kanang feeling or kanang the show sila of like liberalism nga na hope sa future, na hope. While sa pessimistic is no hope. So it liberalism shared an optimistic view of ER, believing that world order can be improved with peace, progress, gradual replacement of war. They may not be agree to the detail, but optimistic view generally unites them. Na ang kuan. So sa realist tend to dismiss optimism. Ginako nila gina disregard nila or kanang wala sila gakuan sa gatuo sa kanang about sa belief sa mga sa kanang liberalism. This is due to the focus. They are more kanang op- optimism as form of misplaced idealism, and instead we arrive to a more pessimistic view. This is due to their focus on the centrality of the state and its need to be security and survival anarchy system. So another point to keep in mind is that each of the overreaching approach in international relations possess a different perspective on the nature of state. Both liberalism and realism considered state as the dominant actor of VR. So that's all, sir. That's all about kanang traditional theories of liberalism and realism.
Okay, thank you, Shinab. Who's next?
Si kuan na dayon, sir. Annalie.
Okay, please proceed.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Please proceed, Annalie. Yes, madunggan. Ina siya, Shinab, madunggan.
Madunggan ay masya pa. Madunggan an. Madunggan ka.
Madunggan ka ni Sir Ann.
Is all about, sige. Ang topic nako is all about middle ground theory. The thinking of the English school is often viewed as a middle ground between liberal and realist theory. Its theory involves the idea of a society of states existing at the international level. The middle ground theory, which from the word middle, a middle ground, kuan kanang compromise agreement between two position, which means wala siya wala siya ginakampihan nga isa or wala siya ginapalabis kanang fair siya fair siya mag-judge or ana. Then kung sa tao pa siya is matured siya kay kanang wala siya ginapalabi nga isa nga side, wala siya ginatapigan. So siya. Hedley Ball, according to Hedley Ball, one of the core figures of the English school, agreed with the traditional theories that the international system was anarchic. According sa iyaha, ang international system was anarchic, which means wala ga control, free sila nga gakuan, galiyok da sa state. In this sense, states form an anarchical society. Ball 1977, where a type of order just exists based on shared norms and behaviors. So ang state nag-form sila og anarchical society, which ang order ga-exist. So gabase sila sa mga gina-shared nga mga norms and behaviors. The next is contractivism is another theory commonly viewed as a middle ground, but this time between mainstream theories and the critical theories. Ang contractivism is kani nga theory gaingon nga ang mga nagtuon nag-build sila og new knowledge rather than passively taking an information. Ang critical theories mao ni siyang ga-expose and challenge the communication of dominant social, economic, and political structures. Then ang sa mainstream theories mao ni ang ga-describe sa mga economic systems nga ang sistema dili maka-experience of crisis. Unlike scholars from other perspectives, constructivists highlight the importance of values and shared interests between individuals who interact on the global stage. Sa constructivist, gin-highlight din nila ang kuan ang importante nga values and shared interests sa states kay mao man ni ang importante sa tanan ang values and shared interests sa individuals. Then, according kay Alexander Wind, the prominent constructivist described the relationship between agent or the individuals and structures such as the state as one in which structures not only constrain agents but also construct their identities and interests. Gidescribe ni Alexander ang relationship between individuals and structures which the state. Ang state, dili lang niya gina-constrain ang mga person nga naa sa states kundi ang identities pod o ang interest sa mga individuals. Nawala. Yes, sir.
Yes, continue. Wala ka nawala.
Madunggan, sir.
Madunggan. Kamo Shinab, madunggan ninyo si Annalie?
Madunggan.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Continue. I'm listening.
Sa according kay Alexander Wind, ang gina-describe niya ang relationship between individuals and the state. So, kuan kay connected na lang relationship sa individual to kuan state. Dili lang tao ang iyang construct kundi ang identities and interests nga ilang gina-act dira sa state. Dili sa iyang famous phrase, anarchy is what states make it of it and sums up the well. Para to understand contractivism is to understand that ideas or norms as they are often called have power. International relations is then a never-ending journey of change, chronicling the accumulation of the accepted norms of the past and emerging norms of the future. As such, constructivists seek to study this process. Para masabtan ang contractivism, kinahanglan nga intindihan pod nato ang ideas na or norms ang international relation wala siya ending nga journey because kuan ga-continue lang Japon sila record og mga ilang mga makuha sa ilang study kay ga-continue man siya ga-emerging siya sa norms to the future. From the word accumulation, gagather sila mga ideas, maong ga-continue ang study about constructivism. Critical theories share one particular trait. They oppose commonly held assumptions in the field of IR that have been central.
An kay Micaela na ila ko na
Ay,
ma-report.
Ay, sorry. Sige, Micaela.
Judy, ikaw na. Naman din siya. Judy, ikaw na.
Shin. Kuan na ko, liberalism na ko og kuan, kana realism, paingon sa ubos. Kami ka na. Sige. Critical theories shared one particular trait. They oppose commonly held assumption in the field of international relation that have been.
What happened? Shinab.
Nawala ata siya, sir. Na-out siya.
Who's next? Continue ang sunod.
Micaela, sir.
Ano ka Micaela? Micaela?
Paki-next slide ko, sa bourgeoisie na.
Critical theories, no?
Okay. According to Karl Marx, the society is divided into two classes, the business class. So, muna na siya ang bourgeoisie or upper class, factory owners, that came to own the means of production during modern industrialization. Then, proletariat or lower class or working class people regarded collectivity. So kani siya, so you can see sa pyramid is naa sa upper sa taas nga side ang bourgeoisie. Kay sila man ang kanabitang murag sila ang kanang gakuan og negosyo, sila ang gapalakad og negosyo, sila ang gakuan og business while ang proletariat is sila ang workers. So sila ang kanang trabaho sa taga bourgeoisie. So if wala ang isa, if wala ning bourgeoisie, dili mag-work ang proletariat. Then kung wala po ang proletariat, dili mag-work ang bourgeoisie kay kuan man ni siya, need sila nga mag-work together para mag-unite sila duwa. Then next and so post-colonialism differs from Marxism by focusing on the inequality between nations or regions as opposed to classes. Post-colonialism origins can be traced to the Cold War period. Colonialism is gikolonize sa three ka country. Muna ni siya ang Japanese, American, o Spaniards. Then, ang sa post-colonialism is natakal siya kung unsa ato ang gaka-adapt sa pag-colonize nila sa ato. First is sa Japanese. Ang sa Japanese is ang atong na-adapt sa laha is ang pagka-business minded, kanang ang pagka-diskarte sa pagnegosyo, yan na. Dayon ang pag-asugarol, una na magina siya sa tuwa, di ba, ang pag-asugarol kanang nagani nga online sabong, kanang mga cards, yan na. Next is sa American. Ang atong na-adapt sa American is kanang the way sila manamit. Kung sa una kay kanang kanang Pilipiniana, na ang sa lalaki kay gabarong. But karon tungod sa ilahang tuan dahil kanang atong gaka-adapt sa ilaha is kanang gawer na ang lalaki og tuxedo, ang mga babae kay kanang nanay cocktail kung nay party so ingan na. Then ang isa pod is ang language kanang na-adapt na to mag-English speaking. Next is sa Spaniards. Ang sa Spaniards is sa Christianity. Kanang pagabot sa Spaniard kaning ilang spread or ilang introduce ang God. So sa una is ang ato lang ginatuan-tuan ni kanang mga diwata, kanang atong ritualan ang mga bato, lupa, tubig, mga ingana. So karon is na nagitay ginatuon nga nagid si Papa Jesus. Next is ang ilahang language. Nga gaka-adapt Japon na to karon. Kanang example ni is kana bitaw sa uno. Next slide. Feminism is focused on explaining why so few women seem to be in positions of power and examining the implications of this on how global politics was structured. So sa feminism is gakuan na siya sa equality sa women. So sa una is kanang ang mga babae kinara sa balay dapat magbantay ra og bata nasa balay magbuhat og kanang household chores iyan na. But karon is gakatagaan na og power or gakatagaan nag um importansya ang mga babae, which means karon nanatay um nanatay gaka-elect nga leader nga babae, nanay nanay lawyer, naanay pulis, military. So dili na ba to siya yung nag-discriminate kay kung unsa man ang ginabuhat sa lalaki kay gakabuhat na sa babae. So ingan na. Next is the post-structuralism. It is an approach that questions the very beliefs we have all come to know and feel as being real. So, ang structuralism is there's only one universal truth, which means kanang isa ra atong ginatuan. Yan na. But ang post-structuralism is there's no universal truth, which means kanang ang atong ginatuhan is kanang real, kanang may power, kanang tinuod jud. For the example, mga atong example, INPE versus government. So asa man ta mas magtuo, asa man ang mas reliable sila ha, ug nay mas power, di ba, ang government. So magtutos sa government. Isa po sa example is student versus instructors. So mas musunod gid ta sa instructors kasi sila man ang mas naay nabalaan, then sila pud ang naay degree. Ingan na kita nga student po follow pud ta sa kung unsa ang ginakuan sa ato ang instructors. Maura sir, that's all.
Okay, next. Continue.
So,
Ikaw na, Gaed.
yeah. So, good afternoon,
Ay,
sir.
sir, excuse me, sir. Sir, pwede ako sa sakuan? Dito sa nawala ko ng connection ganina, sir.
Sige. Siya lang sa akin. Kaya naputol
Okay,
man to siya
sir.
kagaya na.
Okay, sir.
Go back to, Judy Ann's, part. Okay. Take it away, Judy Ann. Sige na, Judy Ann.
Nawala akong connection, sir. Sorry.
Unsa man, si Kent na? Or continue pa ka?
Good afternoon, good afternoon, sir. Critical theories shared one particular trait. They oppose commonly held assumption in the field of international relation that, sir, di ko kadunggan, sir?
madunggan ka. Sige,
Hello?
continue.
Hello?
Madunggan ka dyan.
Madunggan man.
Sir, kanang madunggan ka nimo?
Oo, madunggan. Madunggan ninyo siya?
Sir, madunggan na mo siya.
Yes, madunggan.
sir.
Kakadunggan ka ni sir. Padayon lang.
Hi, sir.
Hoy, Judy Ann, padayon na.
Padayon,
Sige, sir.
Judan. Padayon.
Critical theories shared one particular trait. Madunggan ko?
Oo, kakadunggan ka na mo. Padayon lang.
Madunggan ako?
Oo, padayon lang. Ay, gunong.
Sige, sir.
Madunggan.
Wala akong connection, sir. Sige. Sige, continue ko, guys, ha?
Oo, continue lang.
Critical, sige. Critical theories shared one particular trait. They oppose commonly held assumption in the fact of international relation.
Hello?
Dili ka madungog, Judy. Nawala na gid ka, Judy, siguro.
Hello.
Sumalangit nawa ang kanyang kaluluwa.
Grabe po kasi no.
Nawala.
Si Kent na lang, uy. Galangay-langay,
Yes,
may
sir.
si Judian. Okay, Kent.
Okay. So, good afternoon, sir. So, ang akong topic day is about sa theory and practice examining the United Nations. So, diri is mag-focus sa about sa United Nations, what is purpose or unsa gid para agad ang United Nations. So, the United Nations is a highly respected international organization created at the conclusion of the Second World War from the ashes of the League of Nations. So, ang kada United Nations is kada siya create na siya para sa mga countries para maging peace and harmony. So, United Nations is a highly respected international organization which is created to in conclusion of the Second World War II. So next is the United Nations. The United Nations does not possess complete power over states. So, in the other word, it has limited authority to interfere in domestic concern, since one of its main purpose has generally been to mediate diplomatically when issues between countries arise. So, ang United Nations is kuha lang siya, sir, nasa limited power para makipag-compete sa power of states, sir. So, ang iyang power lang yun is to creating peace and harmony to sa mga states nga magaway-away. Then, next slide. So, the United Nations, mga to siya. So, from a theoretical point of view, the effectiveness and utility of the United Nations differs depending on which perspective we choose to adopt. So, in liberal tend to have faith in the capacity of international organization, which is primarily the United Nations along with other organizations such as the International Monetary Fund, the World Health Organization, and the World Bank. So ang United States is siya, depending on which perspective we choose to adopt. Napod niya siya panang capacity sa international, which is nasa connection along International Monetary Fund, World Health Organization, and World Bank to uphold the global governance and framework of diplomacy. Then next is in realist, although they do not reject the United Nations completely, argue that the world is anarchic and state will be eventually resort to war despite the effort of international organization, which have a little real authority. Generally, realists believe that international organizations appear to be successful when they are working in the interest of powerful states. And next is in contrast to liberal and constructivist, the United Nations was valued and extinct critical theories over different perspectives. For example, Marxists would argue that any international body, including the United Nations, work to promote the interests of the business class. After all, the United Nations is composed of states who are the chief protagonists in global capitalism, in which very thing that Marxist is opposed to. Pero likewise, the United Nations can be said to be dominated by imperial powers. Imperialism, according to Marxist doctrine, is according to Marxist doctrine, the Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. The United Nations then is not an organization that offer any hope of real emancipation of citizens. Even though it may appear humanitarian, those actions are merely band-aids over a system of perpetual state exploitation that United Nations legitimate. And in post- post-structuralist theory would seek to question the meaning behind the rule of the United Nations and the arbitrary power structure of the Security Council. While in ay, for example, examining the wording of concept like peacekeeper and peacekeeping as opposed to peacemaking and peace enforcing or similarly collective security versus international security. So in post-structuralist theory would be skeptical as to whatever term really differ in meaning and would point to the power of language in advancing the agenda of United Nations. While in feminist theory would look to how those in position of powers, whether politicians and for the sum up of that all theory, so this brief reading of the United Nations from this varied perspective has opened your eyes to the potential of irrational theory is as analytical tool. We have barely scratched the surface, but it would be clear why many divergent views are needed in irrational and how it bases sense may be applied. So, moral shit and answer. And for the conclusion of this chapter, for the conclusion of this chapter, so this chapter has surveyed the main approach in irrational theory, each of which possess a legitimate yet different view of the world. It is important to note that the theories listed in chapter are not executive and there are many more that would be examined. So in this chapter, you have a many different perspective view about the irrational theories about United Nations and using a theory of and using the theory to critique an issue as the chapter did with the United Nations is to understand the reason why these theories exist. Simply the offer of means by which is to attempt to understand a complex world. So using theory to critique an issue to simply the offer a means by which is attempt to understand a complex world. As international relation has grown in complexity, the family or theories that irrational offers has grown in number. So that's all, sir.
Okay. So we are done. Wala na gito si ano? Si ang isa ba? Ito to?
Si Judy,
Fernandez.
sir.
Mm. Na, kantsawan na siya ni Mandolo.
Ang good, sir.
So what is...
Nagatamog ko sa maganda sa makawalang buhay.
Oh. So basically, the primary purpose of these different theories is that if you are asked to analyze, basically, analyze or to make a comment on what is going on in the international affairs or international relations, then you will use these various theories for you to critique or understand a particular event or situation in the international relations. So, kumbaga, ina na siya. So, for instance, if you are using the feminism or the feminist theory in analyzing what is going on in the um, let's say in the United Nations. So in the view of the feminist theory, they are going to look at who are the people behind the United Nations, 'di ba? As what the reporter said a while ago, that you view when you view using the feminist ideology or theory, you look at the one who are ruling in a particular international organization. Masculine ba ang organization, meaning majority of the one that runs the organization are men, then that would mean that there is a kumbaga outnumber ang mga kababaihan. Or on the other way around, when you use the Marxist ideology or theory, then you look at the society which is divided into two traditional class, di ba? The bourgeoisie as well as the proletariat. And of course, those that controls the working class, they are the bourgeoisie, di ba? And then the proletariat are the working class. Okay. And then what else? Okay. Of course, when we talk of post-colonialism, as what I've said earlier, when Kanusani siya nag-emerge as a political theory, this happened right after uh, the Second World War, wherein majority of the world, a majority of the former colonies of the European empires, such as the British, the Spaniards, okay, the French, okay, the European conquerors before, katong ilang mga gisakop before, have attained the status of independence, just like what we have discussed yesterday, Cambodia. Okay, Cambodia is a former colony of the French Empire, and they attained their independence kanus 1950, di ba? And then the Philippines 1946 from the Americans. Okay, so inana siya. So many of these former colonies wanted somehow development. Okay? So that is why after the Second World War, diri ni nag-start ang concept sa um, development and post-colonialism, wherein there is a discussion on inequality between nations or regions as opposed to classes. So kaning mga former colonies, they wanted that their country to become developed just like the West. Kumintag West, kanang mga Europeans, and then the United States. So the Western country is somehow the kumbaga ginalook into or ginatanaw as a role model. Okay, muna nga, if your country kanang sa theory of development, okay, it's just a theory of the development that you need to follow the footsteps of the West if you wanted to attain the status of development. Kumbaga inana. Muna ang theory sa modernism. Okay? So inana siya. And then so anong na post-colonialism origins can be traced in the Cold War, because this period also, Cold War, this is the period wherein the two superpowers, the Russia, the former USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, and then the United States. This is the period. The Cold War is a period wherein there is a conflict in terms of political ideology and economic ideology between USSR and the United States. Because as you know, as what we have discussed in the previous subjects, the former USSR are promoting socialist ideology. Okay, and then the United States is promoting, of course, democratic and liberal approach to the economy and politics, and at the same time in terms of the international relations. So, however, when we look, even though these countries that gained independence from their former colonizers already attained their independence. That's why majority of the countries today are former colonies of the West. Okay, and when the United Nations was crafted or created in 1946, and it's the start that these former colonies attained equality. But you cannot, many critics if you've read the book, many critics of the United Nations saying that there is no equality among the states in the world, regardless of the status of your economy, how big is your population, how big is your sitawagan your country is in terms of resources, etc. No, wala equality among the countries in the world, because even the United Nations is saying that every country is equal, but in reality, no. Okay, there's no such thing as equality, only inequality. Okay, kaya naman, if you look at the structure of the example, United Nations Security Council, kung yun nagibasa sa libro, this is very important. In the United Nations Security Council, there are 15 members. The Security Council is the very, kumbaga, powerful organ of the United Nations, because there are several organs in the United Nations. Like, for example, the General Assembly, the GA man na siya. Sa GA, tanan nasod sa United Nations, miyembro sa General Assembly. Okay, kana makita ninyo. Like, for example, and every country is represented sa General Assembly. Sa ECOSOC, Economic Committee, nagyahapon. But in the UN Security Council, there are only 15 countries who are member of the UNSC. And of the 15, 5 of these are considered as permanent member. Kung may permanent member, dili sila gakapulihan. Sa 15, 5 lang ang permanent, and then ang 10 ana every 2 years gakapulihan. So kaning 5 kinsa man ni sila, they are the countries that won during the Second World War, and these countries are the most powerful countries in terms of wealth, military power, etc. And these are the United States, Russia, France, Great Britain. Okay, kana sila nga mga nasod are considered as the allied powers during the Second World War, and they're the one basically established strongly the United Nations. So basically, they have veto power. When we talk of veto power, unsa gyud ang veto power, like for example, in the case of the Philippines, the president can exercise veto power. When we talk of veto power, that's the power of the president to decline, not to accept or not to sign any law in order for that to become binding. Okay, so sa UNSC, every permanent member should vote in favor for a resolution before a resolution becomes binding. When we talk of becomes binding, kana bang mag-took effect siya. So that would mean that if only one member of the United Nations Security Council will agree, I'm referring to the 5 permanent member ha, kung I disagree, kung isa sa 5 nga mag-disagree, a resolution cannot become binding among the members of the UN. Okay, that is why if you look at the history of the United Nations Security Council, US and then the Russian Federation or kanang Russia karon have been kumbaga in conflict na, right? Even though ang Russia is the precursor naman na siya sa USSR, okay? Even until today, this very day, lahi gid na ang ilahang perspective sa mga butang. So because of that, the UNSC cannot make a decision in terms of having full majority vote sa full 5 votes sa UNSC. Kaning Russia ug China, for the longest time they are allies, while US, France, and then the UK are also allies. So kumbaga 3 versus 2 nang gakahitabo sa UNSC. So because UNSC is very important, kumbaga very important nga instrument sa in terms of having si tawag ani security, having preventing war in the world. Okay, nga naman kay kanang UNSC, that is the most powerful organ of the United Nations. Okay, kana sila ang ga-take og action, ga-decide unsaon pag-prevent ang world war or conflict gakahitabo sa matag nasod. However, again, there are instances nga these countries will take unilateral action. When we talk of unilateral action, kanang siya lang ang mag-take siya action on its own. Okay? Dili without agreement, without a resolution being approved by the United Nations Security Council. Like for example, I will give you a case. In what happened in the Middle East before, like for example, during the Gulf War. You know what happened in the Gulf War, wherein the former the former leader of Iraq, who was Saddam Hussein before, di siya gusto nga mag-step down as the leader of Iraq, and the US is accusing him of storing nuclear weapon. As what we have discussed in the previous discussion, nuclear weapon is no longer allowed to be possessed by any country in the world as mandated by the United Nations. And the United States have been accusing Iraq before of storing these nuclear weapons. And Russia, as well as China, is with Iraq that wala lagi may nuclear weapon. So, givote dito sa givote nila sa UNSC. And then walay gakabuhat nga vote sa UNSC tungod kay dili man magkasinabot si Russia, si US, si China, UK, and also France. So because of that, sige buhat ni US kay di man sila magkasinabot 5. Si US siya nagbuhat sa unilateral action. Siya lang mismo nisugod sa Iraq without any support, backing of the UN Security Council. That is an example of how, kumbaga, infutile or kumbaga sa Bisaya pa, inutil ang United Nations Security Council because of the differences in terms of political ideology among its members. So inana siya. So kung maglantaw ka karon sa what's going on around the world, you will view it based on these perspectives, kung baga. If you will be using post-colonialism, liberal, neoliberal, realism, inana. Questions? Nasabtan ninyo? Because these are very
Ako,
basic in international relations, manggod. Kani nga mga concepts. So, kung mo graduate mo pasar mo ani nga subject, then you must be well versed of what's the difference between these different theories. Okay, these are very basic. So dapat bakabalom. And in fact, kani nga book nga atong gibasa karon, basic yun kini siya nga libro. You can still read a lot more detailed explanation, kumbaga, in other resources. But as what I have said to you in the previous meeting, kani siya nga libro nga akong basa gid sa inyo are very foundation of international relations. So foundation siya para na may strong backbone or background of the subject matter. Question? Dapat magbasa mo ha. Dili nga ang reporter lang ang gabasa sa libro. Okay, pag-abot sa exam, kung i-question na siya, halimbawa, you differentiate these various theories of international relations na Pasig ang group 5, group 4 lang ang maka-answer. Okay? If you will just rely on the discussion. So, or report. So, in your own, you must also read, di ba? Next question.
Yan, sir.
None. Okay. If in-observe ninyo in my other class, like for example in ASEAN Studies, because I'm also teaching ASEAN Studies for this semester, I always invite you because this subject, international relations, always have a significance. Okay. Sa ASEAN Studies, mo na nga, every time na ako'y lecturer or international lecturer in my ASEAN Studies, gina-invite yun to mo. Kaya naman, related yun na ang ASEAN Studies sa international relations. 'Di ba? In ASEAN, we are talking among the 10 member states or countries. And these are different different country from our own, which is the Philippines. So, mas maayo pod nga makabalo mo sa background in terms of their government, in terms of their culture, in terms of what is going on in the area, in terms of the how we fight the pandemic, because every country have their own experiences in terms of fighting the pandemic, and that is discussed in this international lecture series. So you should grab the opportunity, although you are not required ba nga magkuan jud because I have the recording, but mas maayo man lay ang experience, di ba, kung naka mismo sa meeting room compared ka nang gatanaw lang ka og recording, because you can interact if you are in the on-site or nagid ka sa meeting room, because you have the opportunity to ask question. Pero kung mag-rely lang pud ka sa recording, then it's up to you, di ba? Question. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Oh,
None so far.
kanang dili reporter. Nan so far magiging mga reporter. Kanang dili reporter ba question. Nasabtan ninyo ang ilang report? Wala. May wala na ba na kung wala kasabot kay di ka tingog ko?
Kan, sir. Ako pangutan, sir.
Sige. Question.
Ano siya, sir, ba? Napa na siya relate sa kaliwat materials man na siya, sir? Napa na siya relationship sa katong 9 or 12 social science paradigm?
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's a very good question, no? Kaning manggod nga mga theories, although because in other subjects you will also encounter this, di ba? Kag liberalism, realism, post-colonialism. Kani sila nga mga theories, napod ni siya sa uban nga mga subjects ninyo. Nani siya sa sociology, nani siya sa anthropology, kaning Marxism, grabe na kayo ni kapanos, di ba? Because these are somehow different man ni siyang theories, pero ang ilang perspective ginasulod ba sa matag subject. Okay? Related yun na siya. Related na. Si Marxism, mag-study kag society, mag-study kag economics, nana siya. Di ba? Nag-study kag international relations, study kag politics, nana siya permanente. Okay? Even in psychology, even in in history, di ba? Kaya nagid na siya permanente because every kani siya nga mga dimensions or other term na to ani nga theories, school of thought. Okay? They are being utilized in various disciplines. Dili ni siya naka-confine lang sa isa ka discipline. No. Okay? Dili ni siya. Like for example, again, kaning Marxism, kaning proletariat and bourgeoisie nga topic, okay? Dili naman napod di siya sa management, di ba? Kung mag-study ka og public administration, napod ni siya, okay? The different theories of public ad, napod na siya, okay? Did I answer your question, Mandol? So kumbaga dili siya confined sa isa ka subject. So may nakanindot sa social science because you will be kumbaga gina-open ang imuhang panghuna-huna in various perspectives. Kumbaga, broad-minded ka ba? Kung naka sa social science, dili lang isa kay dimension ang imuhang ginatan-aw. Daghan. Kung mag-analyze ka og isa ka situation or problem or phenomena, you can utilize various theories. So, for example, in this case, sa international relations, kung mag-analyze ka og isa ka international conflict, what theory or school of thought are you going to use, okay, as a imong explanation nganong gakahitabo ni siya, di ba? Gakahitabo ang isa ka phenomena. That is why kung inyong gibasa ang libro na nakabutang dito sa conclusion dara, so nakabutang dire. Now, it is important to understand these various theories as tools of analysis, okay? As tools of analysis that you can apply in your respective studies. So later on, if you will be doing your thesis, you can utilize these various perspectives as your anchorage. Kumbaga, asa man nimo gi-anchor ang imuhang study? Sa feminist ba? Sa post-colonialism ba? Sa post-structuralism ba? Sa liberalism ba? Sa realism? Sa neoliberalism? Kani, magamit ninyo ng mga theories later on when you do your research, because part of the research is where did you anchor your study, di ba? Asa man nimo gi-base nga theory. Okay, you cannot make your own study kung wala kay anchorage, wala kay basis ba kumbaga. So that is why manang importante mag-study og mga different theories kay you can use that later on when you do your research. Na dayon. Nani siya sa asa ba na? Sa chapter 1? Okay. So chapter 1 sa inyohang na ba may research karon? Subject?
Sir.
Unsa inyong research? Quali.
Quali.
Oh. Nag-discuss mo na. Quali research methods ninyo na. Okay, tsada man na siya.
Second year, sir. Kung sir, wala man sa katapis, sir.
Ansa?
Kung sa katong second year, nakatapit niya na sa katong mga methods, sir. Yung karon sir, siguro siya niyatag, sir. Pero gapon ra ato niya yatag itong mga patong basahonon. Then activity din, sir.
Gibundakan ni tanan, sir.
Ansa yung subject?
Hmm?
Quali?
Quantitative.
Dili,
Sir.
quali, sir.
Quali.
Qualitative method, social science research.
Kana. That is very important. Kay inani magud na siya. Ang kanang inyuhang statistics and then ang inyuhang research methods, they are foundation courses. When we talk of foundation, mo na siya ang backbone ninyo para sa inyong research nga pagabuhaton or magitawag ninyo ng thesis. So, importante kayo ang research methods, labi na kay sa inyo social science, duha man ka methodology, mamili mo either quantitative or qualitative. And both approaches, mamili mo unsa nga basis ang inyong theoretical background ang inyong gamiton. Okay? So, kani siya karon, pwede na ninyo na siya i-use as a basis later on in your studies. Okay? Either quanti mo or qualitative mo. Okay? In my case, both when I was in the undergraduate, my thesis is utilize a quantitative method. So, quanti. So, naakoy, of course, nag-survey ko through a questionnaire in my respondents. I look at the population, okay? Then kay kuan raman ta, sampling raman ta, there is a kumbaga na kay sampled population based on the entire population na kay sample size nga pagakuhaon, and that would conclude na statistically speaking maka-represent siya sa entire population ang kanang imong gitawag nga sample size. So because of that, ang imong panel karon tan-awon kung haum ba ang imong methodology sa imong buhat nga research. Kay kung dili, that's the duty of the panel to guide you nga dili mao or to change ang methodology sa imong study. Okay? Na dili ka maglisod. Okay? Later on. And then, in my master's thesis na dayon, I utilize qualitative. Ano nag-qualitative man ko? Kaya na mo ko'y background sa quanti para kabalo ko sa duha ba? Na ko'y background sa duha. So, in my master's thesis na dayon, that is qualitative in nature, but I interviewed because my study is utilizing the feminist ideology, kumbaga. Okay? That is women in local politics, experiences in mainstream governance. That's the title of my study. So basically, I look into the different experiences of elected women politicians in the province of Bukidnon, because the problem here is that basically, the one who is getting elected into position in our government majority are men. Okay, if you look at the statistics, then why is that so? That's the very question that I asked in my thesis. Ngano kaha? Okay, then we look at because when you do research, you need to study the kumbaga existing studies that have been published already. Okay? So kumbaga man ang imong gitawag nga chapter 3 or review of related literature. Okay. Sa imong review of related literature, diya nimo ginasulat unsa ang mga studies nga nag-exist na karon, then unsa man ang gina-address sa imong present nga study. Mao na gitawag nimo nga gap. Okay? Ang gap mao na ang nganong gusto nimo studyhan. Kay when we talk of women in, alimbawa, women in politics, daghan man kayo study gi-exist na. Okay? Unsa may naka-unique sa imong study nganong wala pa man ni siya na studyhan, di ba? So inana na siya. And then I look at the barriers. Okay? Barriers why women are not getting into a position. Okay? Then ngano di ay, then that's why I look into the experiences. So I have an interview with various politicians in the province. So from the north, I interviewed the vice mayor, some of the towns. Okay, vice mayor sa Sumilao, kung taga Sumilao mo, sa Impasugong, yara, kay mga babae man na ang ilahang vice mayor dira. Then I also have a councilor in Kitaw-Taw, akong interview, and then of course saka-interview po kog mga barangay kapitan, because wala man kay ma-interview nga governor, lalaki man na dira. And then but of course you need to ask consent first, di ba? Because having a research would take time. Okay, that's why you will be given a year. Okay, 1 year. Pag 4th year mag 4th year naman dito mo, so dapat karon daan na mo'y solid background sa research para pag-abot ninyo sa 4th year, dili na kayo mo maglisod kay kanang product ninyo sa inyong quantity o quality, supposedly that would be your working paper na dayon pag-abot ninyo, so that pag-abot ninyo sa thesis writing na mo'y makadefend na mo, nakadefend na mo or makadefend na mo sa inyong proposal. Na siya. Humana mo kwanti. Kinsa yung kwanti nga teacher?
Ma'am Belderol.
May wife?
Ma'am Darren.
Dili akong wife.
Darren, ma'am.
Darren.
Ay, sir.
Okay. So, kana, maiya pa na si Ma'am Darren sa research. Pasar mo.
Pasar,
sir.
Wala pa may kita uban eh.
Ah. Pero ang yung final output is a proposal, right?
Yes, sir.
By group
Yes,
mo?
sir.
By group.
Dili
Individual, sir.
Ah,
Individual.
wow. Gay kayo mo dira. Individual.
hadlok.
Char. Gipa-defend mo niya. Wala na.
Wala na, sir.
Ah, okay. Pa-defend na mo. Sugot mo?
Remedial lang, sir.
Ah, okay. So, ina na siya. Okay. Okay na ta? It's already 3 na. I hope you've learned something from this report. This is very important, no? Okay na? Unless you have questions or clarifications pa.
Wala na, sir.
Wala na?
Yes, sir.
Unsa
Wala
pa?
na, sir.
Ah, sige. I-kuhan lang ni Annalyn kay magkonta. Check attendance na. I-stop sharing. Then open your camera.
Dili ko ka-open og cam, sir.
Ah, katong maka-open be. Ang di maka-open ya. Kuhan, wali attendance.
Kadit lang sir, mga
Ah, na di ay. Naman pud mo kuhan daw picture. Sige na, 1, 1, 2, 3. Ah, grabe. Neil Chadros, oh. 1, 2, 3, smile. Another one. 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Bye, class. See you next meeting.
Goodbye,
Group
sir.
5.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
bye-bye.
bye sir.
I-post pa, sir, ang PowerPoint.
Bye.
Yes, Shinab, kindly post the PowerPoint sa group. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
God bless,
sir.
sir.
Okay, bye-bye.